America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Toni Angelini, Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Operations for Job Creators Network.
Please subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. Today, we're joined by Erec Smith. Erec is a research fellow at the Cato Institute, a former associate professor of rhetoric at York College of Pennsylvania, and the co-founder of Free Black Thought, a nonprofit dedicated to highlighting viewpoint diversity within the Black communities. Erec, welcome to Main Street Matters.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and the mission of Free Black Thought.
Well, for my entire life, really, I've noticed that Black people are considered a monolith by mainstream media and by, typical Americans. And I realized that I wanted to do something about that. Fortunately, I found other people who also wanted to do something about that. And we got together and we created Free Black Thought, which is there to highlight viewpoint diversity within the Black community. In fact, I don't even like saying the term Black community, because that implies a monolith of sorts. So Black communities is more accurate in our minds. But anyway, we have an online journal highlighting these voices that you wouldn't normally hear in mainstream media. We have a podcast doing the same thing. We have a compendium of readings, poetry, scholarly essays, things like that. And we're working on K through 12 curricula right now to counter things like Black Lives Matters in schools and things like that. So that's what Free Black Thought is about.
What do you think it has, the Black Lives Matter and the whole sort of DEI movement has been so successful in getting into our schools and becoming part of the vernacular and that type of language in our society? Because it's been really fast.
It's been very fast. And George Floyd really sped things up a few years ago. I was at a conference a few years ago, and there was a 17-year-old there at this conference, very precocious. When I was 17, I was not going to conferences, I tell you that. And she said, DEI, she said CRT at the time, but DEI got into the schools because the schools were already broken, and I thought that was very interesting. And what she meant by that is that the schools were already trying to, counter a lot of societal ills and things like that. And in doing that, they were making some less than intelligent decisions about helping traditionally downtrodden people. And that alone, that just misconception of what was necessary for those people kind of opened the door for, ideologies like DEI and CRT. So the intentions were good for a lot of people, but what that did was open the door for people with, I think, bad intentions, who had different goals other than helping people, right? They wanted to help themselves in a lot of ways. They wanted to destabilize trusted institutions because they wanted to remake society into something that they prefer, right? So there's a lot of opportunism going on there as well. But the door was opened by good intentions, people who wanted to help.
I was going to say, if you work under the assumption that DEI began from a good place, of a place of really wanting people to understand each other, people that might have, diverse backgrounds or not necessarily have day-to-day interactions. At some point, it was obviously hijacked by and turned into a billion-dollar industry by some nefarious people. I saw you in an interview where you said, I'm paraphrasing here, but you essentially said that at some point, accomplishment became synonymous with privilege. Yeah. And that hit me. I have to say that really like the hair on the back of my neck stood up, because I've struggled for a long time with sort of my feelings about this DEI initiative, and knowing that I, want the world to be a better place and a happier place for everybody. I was like, that's it. That's the missing piece. So, if you're confusing accomplishment and privilege, how do we get that out of the DEI mainstream, and how do we start to allow people to be proud of their accomplishments, and not conflate them with just being handed something because of the color of their skin?
I think it's okay to acknowledge that some people start in a less than beneficial place, right? For achieving their goals and things like that. I think it's understandable to acknowledge those things. It is not okay to demonize the people who had a better starting point, but still worked hard to get to where they are. I use a metaphor of a marathon, and one person is starting here and another person is starting 1 foot, further than that other person. But that person, the person who started 1 foot further, wins the race by 3 hours, right? So that 1 foot didn't mean very much, right? A lot of that's going on here as well. I mean, it's a lot of what's going on is a matter of degree, right? Sure, I was privileged in that my family was lower middle class and yours was poor, all right? But still, I mean, I worked hard to get to where I am, right? Perhaps you had to work harder, and that's unfortunate. But, that's going to happen in a free and liberal and pluralistic society, right? People are going to have different talents for different things, and they're going to have different levels of success. That's just part of the system. And a lot of people can't handle that.
So we have this DEI multi-billion-dollar industry that is now infiltrating everywhere, our education system, our corporate America. I mean, you name it. How do we undo sort of some of the damage that has been done? Because there's been plenty of studies that are actually showing that corporations that invoke DEI training, years later, have not increase the diversity of their training, of their hires post DEI training. Mm-hmm. How do we start to undo some of the damage that's already been done, and is actually in some cases perpetuating more racism than actually helping us, everybody get along?
I think it's already being undone. A lot of corporations are rolling back their DEI initiatives. They're laying off DEI officers or DEI administrators. Schools are getting rid of required courses focused around DEI, and they're reallocating funds to other places to benefit more students. We're seeing that. It's already happening. But I think last year, with October 7th, the Hamas attacks and the response to that were, at best, mildly anti-Semitic, right? And then we have the Ivy League presidents not condemning it. And then we have Ivy League presidents who were caught plagiarizing, things like that. All of these things came together. It was a perfect storm of anti-DEI sentiment that really opened people's eyes. So I think that alone has already started the ball rolling backwards, as far as rolling back some of these DEI initiatives and letting people know that a lot of these ideas, a lot of these sentiments were ill-informed, like the privilege versus accomplishment thing, right? Like the idea that intent never matters, right? These are, decidedly illiberal ideas. In fact, if we want to talk about how bad DEI ideas are, we can compare them to what America is supposed to be, the American creed, the embrace of equality and free speech and things like that, the things that this country was supposed to be built on, right? The idea that the country is kind of fake or kind of an imposter for classical liberalism comes from the fact that all men were created equal, but we had slavery, right? But once that was, remedied to a large degree, we started to live up to what we were trying to do, right? We started to live up to the American creed. We started to live up to all men and women being created equal, right? And once we start living up to that, we can look forward and move forward. A lot of people want to look backwards because, the disconnect between slavery and all men created equal gave them a reason to push back and dislike America. That reason is gone, so they have to double down on things now. And that's how we got the last 10 years.
One of the things I love about what we do at Job Creators Network is we focus on small businesses and policies that help them begin, grow, thrive, pro-business policies. So it doesn't matter what race you are. It's just, how does the policy impact your business? Higher taxes takes more money out of the entrepreneur's pocket, so they can't invest in their business and grow their business, and things like that. Hire more people, and when you're hiring more people, you're employing people, they're paying taxes, and sort of goes on and on. I think what makes this country so amazing is that the opportunities to start a business are like no other country in the world. I mean, even if you look at, if you look at the highest levels of regulation, it's still easier to start a business and grow a business in this country versus any other business. And our CEO, who actually co-hosts this with me normally, Toni has stepped in today because he's traveling, Alfredo Ortiz, he wrote a book called The Real Race Revolutionaries: How Minority Entrepreneurship Can Overcome America's Racial and Economic Divides. Because it's about having that idea and pursuing it. But what I think is so great about this country is how you can create a business and be successful. If you've got a great product, obviously a great product or a great idea, how do we get that message into, I know you said you hate saying the Black community, but how do we get that message across the country to people that if you've got a good idea, I mean, think about all the moms that, were home and thought, I need to do a side hustle or, and created, a new kid toy or something like that. Like, how do we spread that message in a way that people hear it and understand what it really means?
Well, I would say there are some books out there that I think people would really respond well to. One is written by Rachel Ferguson and Michael Witcher. It's called Black Liberation Through the Marketplace. And it explains, how we can liberate, Black Americans through the marketplace, entrepreneurship. Ian Rowe has a book called Agency, in which he narrows down 4 concepts that we need to really embrace to, liberate Black Americans and help them rise up to where they want to be. And 3 of them are obvious: family, right? Religion, education. The 4th one is entrepreneurship, right? How can we have some agency, be our own bosses, start our own businesses, and get that kind of ultimate freedom. Lastly, there are stories out there that need to be heard. The one story of the young lady in a predominantly Black neighborhood who started her own hair salon, in her living room. It was very successful. She was doing better than the actual hair salons in town, but she was shut down because of, nonsensical regulations. She didn't have certain licensing and things like that. She didn't have, proficiencies that had nothing to do with doing hair, right? And hearing stories about that, how this woman really took her life into her own hands, right? And displayed impressive agency for a young woman, a teenage girl, right? And she was shut down by nonsensical regulations, right? I think books like that and stories like that need to be told more and talked about more.
Who's the right messenger for that? And the reason why I ask is because the Republican Party, conservatives, are always accused of not talking to the Hispanic community or not talking to the Black community or not talking to this community. And our small business owners are across every race and ethnic background. I mean, they're running a business, the ones that we talk to, that we work with. And when I talk to them, what they are talking to me about is a policy that hurts their business and therefore hurts their employees. And so, I'm obviously I'm not Black. I'm not Asian. I probably maybe been discriminated against as a woman in my career growing up, but I don't know what that feels like. But when I talk to people, I talk to them about policies and how can this policy help you and how can it hurt you? Tell me how it hurts your business, because I'll be your messenger. I'll amplify your voice. But who's the right messenger for what you just talked about?
Well, I think it does have to be a minority talking about these things, talking to minorities and things like that. But I don't know if it should be even me, right? Because I'm accused, and I use that word accused purposefully. I'm accused of privilege, right? I'm accused of being in a position, right, that is not typical for Black Americans or something like that. So my voice kind of doesn't count in that sense. I get a lot of people trying to silence me for those reasons, basically saying that I'm inauthentically Black or multiracially white. I love that one. So
I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah. Yes, multiracially white. So it's got to be somebody who is kind of freshly from a downtrodden area, a minority from a downtrodden area, who has succeeded, right? Because he or she embraced entrepreneurship or pushed for a policy that was actually implemented or something like that. So, and these people are out there. They're definitely out there. David Goggins is one person that I really like. He doesn't talk about policy or anything like that, but he is that downtrodden person who achieves some incredible things and goes around the country talking about that. And how the ideas about the typical Black American are erroneous, A, and B, they're not conducive to fulfillment and success. So stuff like that. More people like David Goggins need to be out there talking about these things. I will help to the best of my ability, but I think somebody other than people like me need to be saying these things.
Well, as I mentioned, our CEO, he's Hispanic. He's from Mexico, or not from Mexico. He's born in America. His parents are from Mexico. He credits education with his success, hands down, education. But I mean, he's been called ignorant by a member of Congress when he was testifying about the subject I just talked about of his book, about entrepreneurship is the key, but there are policies that create barriers coming out of Congress that make it very difficult to start businesses sometimes. You mentioned that what you're called sometimes. Just on a personal side, my kids are early 20s. And so as they were going up through school, I was learning new words that I had never, microaggression was one. And I was realizing like how sensitive things had become. Cultural appropriation was one that I learned actually only recently because we were looking back at old pictures of Halloween costumes. My kids love Halloween, even now in their 20s. And my daughter had dressed up as a geisha doll. And with the beautiful dress and the makeup and the hair and all of that. And so now my other daughter says, that's cultural appropriation. And I was like, well, I don't understand. I don't understand that piece of it, because at Halloween, we would look for things that they thought were beautiful, or whether it was Ariel from Disney or a geisha doll, they thought it was beautiful and they wanted to emulate that.
Yeah. Cultural appropriation is a weird one, because I understand that to a degree. If you don't like a particular race, but you dress up as that race for Halloween, that's beyond the pale for me. If you are dressing up because you actually appreciate that culture, right, and you love the beauty of a geisha doll or something like that, and you just want to emulate that for a day, I mean, that's different. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But there are people out there, and I've seen them, unfortunately, who dress up as other cultures to make fun of that culture, right?
Okay.
Or to downplay the difficulties that culture has had. So those people are out there. So they ruin it for everybody else.
Yes.
Yes,
that's it. They ruin it for everybody else. I guess that's it. Yeah. Too bad.
You were talking earlier, Eric, about things that you were accused of. And I did notice that you were also accused, I believe, by other college professors, but you can correct me on that one if I'm wrong. You were accused of invalidating people of color because you were advocating for essentially teaching standard English. How do you sort of how do you rectify that accusation with your own personal experience and your obvious desire to teach youth so that you're impacting a new generation coming up? That had to have been incredibly painful for you, just personally, to be accused of invalidating people of color, to begin with. But how do you sort of get beyond that to advocate for why you feel the way that you do, and to try and break through to those people that were accusing you of doing something so insane?
Well, I can point out the insanity of their mindset, right? I was told that I didn't understand the damage my body was doing to the Black community, which is to say that saying these things as a Black person was hurting Black people. So that's how far gone a lot of my former colleagues in the field of rhetoric and composition were. What's going on here is that I like to teach my students valuable skills that will help them be happy and successful and fulfilled in American society. But if you don't like American society, right, then you don't want to instill those skills in your students. There is a very prominent professor in my field who basically said Black kids who want to learn standard English are being selfish and immature, right? They're just maintaining the status quo, right? With their skill, with their happiness in society, they're maintaining the status quo. If a lot of people were unhappy, that would be more conducive to revolution, right? So teaching standard English is antithetical to his goals, right? So that's what's going on. So I would say, hey, I want to teach people to be happy and fulfilled in this society. This society is not perfect, but we're working on it every day. We're getting there, right? If you want to be happy and successful in this society, you'll probably, grab on to what I'm saying as opposed to what other people are saying regarding standard English and other skills, The idea that standard English is inherently racist comes from the idea that obviously, the English colonized and enslaved Africans, right? But I mean, what's the alternative? Even African American vernacular English is like 80% English, right? I mean, the words are very similar. The syntax is a little different, right? But it's still English. To really fight against that would be to speak an African language, speak Swahili or Yoruba or something like that, right? So it's a silly notion from the get-go. And just pointing out the silliness, pointing out the how antithetical it is to one's success and fulfillment to not speak or write in standard English. Pointing those things out can go a long way, in my opinion.
You and everything that you stand for must pose a level of threat to the academic community that my guess would be that they have a hard time, sort of combating, because it's a lot easier for me to say, the same things you are, and they just, can look at me and say, you have no idea what you're talking about, you're a white lady, but for you to be standing in the position that you are and to genuinely be advocating for so many people, how has that been received in the world of academia?
In academia, I've been called various versions of inauthentic, right? And you can imagine some of the words that are used for that. Uncle Tom is one of them, dupe, coon, all kinds of different things, right? Because I'm not abiding by this stereotypical disposition that all Black people are supposed to have, all real Black people anyway. I want to be happy. I want to be successful. And I want to self-actualize to the greatest degree, right? And in order to do that, I say the things that I say, the value of critical thinking, the value of effective communication, right? The ability to adapt to certain situations when communicating. I'm working on a book right now about the ideal disposition for somebody in a liberal and pluralistic society, regardless of skin color, right? And a lot of those things are supposed to be taught in a liberal arts education, but those things are being demonized by liberal arts professors right now, and I'm trying to push back on that. But yes, I've been called all kinds of names, but all I need to do is just keep talking, right? What they're trying to do is silence me. So as long as I don't stay silent, in my mind, I'm winning.
So you recently left academia. You're the former assistant professor of rhetoric at York College. Why did you leave academia? Is that part of the reason?
Yes, that is part of the reason. Initially, I wanted to stay to push back, right? I wanted to, somebody had to do it, right? And regarding my field, I was pretty much the only voice speaking out about these things. So I thought, I can't leave. But then I realized I can do a lot more outside of academia. With the Cato Institute, for example, as a research fellow, I can do things like this. I can, write about my ideas or how bad the other ideas are, right? Things like that. What's more, and I know I just said that a lot of these things are being rolled back in academia and things like that, but you know what? The people who implemented those bad ideas and the people who let them be implemented are still there, right? It doesn't matter that it's being rolled back. They're just waiting for the next bad idea, right? And I don't know if I want to be there for that, right? So I walked away from academia. It's been a little over a week since I've done that, so I'm still getting used to it. I gave up tenure, which is still something that keeps me up at night. But I think it's the right move because, here, where I am right now, I can do a lot more to fight against these illiberal ideas.
Well, I think that the messages that you're talking about here, one, they help somebody like me understand in a way that doesn't feel divisive. And when I hear some of the other ways that are being communicated, they feel divisive, and they feel like that whole, you have privilege because of this, that, or the other. And I think, well, that was just how I grew up. Why is that a bad thing? And And so when I hear somebody like you carrying that message, it helps me understand so much more. So how do we reform the American higher education system so that those ideas are being heard? Because I think our students are only hearing one way. I mean, I'm sorry that you're not in higher education anymore to have that message, because it is a minority voice. And so if the minority voice is going to leave and we're going to have just that one message there talking about, systemic racism and DEI and capitalism is bad and racist and socialism is the way to go, we lose the message of entrepreneurialism as soon as they think that capitalism is bad, right?
Yes.
What do we do? How do we fix that?
Well, what I'm trying to do is speak up as loudly and as often as possible, right, about these things, to write in as many outlets as possible, to do as many talks as possible, to expose these ideas for what they are. As far as people being shamed for their quote unquote privilege or their positionality or something like that, that is by design. They're trying to be divisive because they don't like the current system we have, and destabilization is a great way to topple that system. You destabilize it. All I can do is speak up. All I can do is not be silent. Right. A lot of people out there are not agreeing with these ideas at all, but they're staying silent because, well, they want to keep their jobs, or they don't want to be mobbed on social media, or they don't want to be bullied at work or something like that. So just speaking up, just not being silent is itself, a large step in the right direction. And that's what I'm trying to do. And if people can see that somebody is out there not buying this stuff, right? Somebody's out there who is not just speaking back against it, but is, ridiculing it, making fun of it. I think humor is a very powerful tool when it comes to this stuff, because you need to ridicule ridiculous ideas. We have to start doing that again. Right?
I love your message because you acknowledge the bad things that have happened, and we all should, and we should learn from them. But you also acknowledge where we've moved to, but also where we need to get to. And I think that that's a great bridge to bringing people together, because things feel so divisive these days. So can you tell our audience where they can go to learn more about you and your writings and your upcoming book?
Sure. You can go to the Cato website, cato.org, to see a lot of my recent media, the last couple of years, things like that. I have a Twitter handle that I rarely use these days, but I do use it. It's at Redders _of_York. It's something that I'm not anymore. Redder of York College. But that's my handle. You can see me there. There's Free Black Thought that is also on Twitter. It has its own website, obviously, but it also has a Twitter presence that is pretty robust, right? We're posting things on a regular basis, and it's not just me posting. It's a bunch of us doing it under one kind of voice, right? So you can find some of my ideas there too, and I basically tell people, just Google my name, just see what happens there. EREC.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have a different way you spell your name. It's EREC. So yes, Google your name. And a lot of interesting interviews come up with you. So I recommend everybody check that out. Erec, thanks so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. And we'll be back soon with another episode.